A special edition of Locked On Auburn, post A-Day edition. I'm Zach Blackerby, joined by Darrell Dapprich, who joins me after every football and basketball game. And while A-Day is not a game, we're going to treat it as if it's one. Darrell, happy Easter to you. And he is risen to Amen. All of the folks watching this morning when this drops on Easter Sunday. But Darrell, I think my biggest takeaway, wasn't able to watch live, got home and watched it. And Robby Ashford looked significantly better than everybody else on the field.
He really did. The RPO system that we talked about last week that we felt like was going to really enhance his tools that he has and his, incredible tool belt and his skill set. The RPO just really does it. Things look so much smoother. I think the biggest thing I noticed with him is as he learns the mesh point, he looked really comfortable when to hand it off and when to pull. Yep. And I was concerned about that. So when he handed the ball off, Auburn had some big runs. Hunter carried the milk early. But when he pulled it, he went around right end or left end like untouched. It was a great read, and it was a really good, I think getting comfortable in the offense. He made a good throw, a seam route that Hugh Freeze mentioned specifically as well to Chick Dawson. So, he only threw it 3 times. And I would have liked to see more from the throwing acumen part of it. But from a running standpoint, from an RPO, that offense looks really, really good and designed for him. Because I can remember a lot of times last year, Zach, with running Harson's offense or Keesau's offense or whoever, whatever that was. A lot of times guys were getting hit in the backfield. The play wasn't developing. I was watching very closely. There was not a first level of contact until 3 or 4 yards downfield. Now people can say, come on, Darrell, it's A-Day. What can you draw from that? Well, I remember A-Day last year, dudes getting hit in the backfield when we were trying to hand the ball off. So at least that's progress. I think that RPO with Robby is a great marriage. It really, really fits, and he's really learning it. And I think he's doing well. And like I said, mesh point, when to keep, when to hand it off. It looked good. It really did.
Well, and the offense, from an offensive line standpoint, as far as winning the line of scrimmage, they look good regardless, I think, of who was at quarterback. It looked the best when Robby was in, but Battie had some good runs. Battie had some good runs with TJ. And then, heck, our guy Sean Jackson, he lowered his shoulder, and I think he's worth a look. We'll see what that certainly looks like as far as maybe a goal line type package or something like that next to Holden. We'll certainly see, but yeah, I think I said it all spring, and now that I guess the entire Auburn fan base has now been able to see this new version of the offensive line, I said that it passes the eye test, and I think what we saw yesterday confirms it. I think they passed the eye test because, Darrell, I don't want to be a hypocrite here when I say this, but I firmly believe that the defensive line, Auburn's starting defensive line, I question their ability to rush the passer, and I said they would be elite at stopping the run. And Auburn's offensive line yesterday was able to run almost at will against them. And so props to this offensive line.
Yeah, I noticed that the offensive line was really opening up holes. They were containing and sustaining blocks to let our backs get around the edge yesterday. I noticed when Geriner or TJ or Robby dropped back to pass too, Zach, there was time. Yeah. It blew my mind. They could look downfield. And again, had it not been so wet and sloppy, I think a lot of what Phil Montgomery is going to be able to do with the passing game off of the running game could be special.
Well, and Robby, though, still with the passing, though. He's still, it's like that first read wasn't there and he didn't know what to do and he kind of freaked out. And then, he ended up, I think it would have been a sack, but they let him run. They let him run, kind of exit to his right. And we'll see if that happens in a game, Darrell. But there's still a long way to go. I think there's still a long way to go. But of the 3 quarterbacks, based on what we saw yesterday, it's Robby, then there's a big gap, and then I think it's TJ, then Holden.
And I would expect that. I think, Robby was your most experienced.
I didn't expect it.
Yeah, I did. And again, it's just a lucky guess. I think that TJ played a lot of minutes last year or a lot of football last year. But once Robby took the job over, he got so many invaluable reps, a lot of reps. And what he's able to do with his legs, to me, is the separator. I think the arm will come. I think the I saw dudes open a lot. I mean, Geriner missed a wide open Mardner that he could have walked in across the middle on a drag route. But I saw a lot of guys open. I saw Landon King miss a ball through his hands. And I think, that was the conditions yesterday, the wet conditions. But I did see guys getting schemed open. And the offensive line, like we talked about, did a good job of allowing guys to run their routes and get them downfield to get open.
So a few things. I don't like that we're making excuses for wet conditions. They're going to probably play in the rain at some point this year. They're going to play in unfortunate weather. So I don't love that we're doing that, and other outlets are doing that as well. And I'm seeing all that on socials and stuff. Well, it was gross. The weather was gross. Like, well, sometimes you got to play it. You got to play the game, whatever the weather is. So I don't know if that's an excuse that we should be making, but I get it. And it definitely impacted the play calling, right? Because I do wonder if every quarterback would have thrown the ball 10 times, would we have felt that Robby looked better than the other two? Like, and there's no way to know, right? There's no way to know. But what we've heard from scrimmages so far throughout spring, and just when they did a lot of team work and practices, Robby was the most inconsistent when it came to passing the football. And so once again, what we saw yesterday, and Robby looked significantly better than everyone else. But I do think we need to look at the full picture in all of this, because that's what spring is. A-Day, we want to overhype A-Day, good or bad, and overreact to all of it. And that's totally fine. But I just think it's important to kind of think, okay, well, if the weather was clean, and Hugh Freeze said they wanted to come out and air it out and they weren't going to be able to, what would that have looked like? And that probably just a gut reaction, Darrell. I think that would have helped TJ.
Yeah, I think I want to clarify the weather comment. It not so much as an excuse as to understand that it limited what you could call, what you could run, and what packages you put in. Like if Auburn struggled like that on a dry, sunny day, I'd have concern. I think most of the time you're going to play in weather that's not that crappy. So they really pared down their play calling and what their route running was and their passing game. That's the concern that's the point that I'm making, is we didn't get to see, I think, what the offense is capable of doing, or the passing game, because they could not even go to it because of the weather. So would they run those plays if they were playing Arkansas in the rain? Sure, they would have a bigger playbook and a bigger tool bag. I think in this, you don't want to make too much judgment off of it because they weren't able to run certain things that they particularly stayed away from because of the weather. But I agree with your point. I mean, if it's going to be nasty, you better be able to throw it in some rainy conditions as well. We just won't know until that happens because of the playbook being pared down because of the weather. I think, too, your point about if it was better and we saw, TJ Finley throw it 10 times, Geriner throw it 10 times, would we see a little bit different quarterback dynamic? Possibly. I just think that the running talent of Robby Ashford is so elite. Totally. When a play breaks down, and in an RPO, TJ Finley and Holden Geriner are not. Now, although Holden Geriner, his credit, kept it on an RPO and walked it in for a 2-point conversion, then ended up being big to make it 24-21.
I think he had a first down as well, the drive prior to that.
He got to the right side. To the right side seemed to be a big area that Auburn got a lot of big gains. Alston, Battie, the quarterbacks. It's just interesting. A lot of big chunk plays went to the right side.
All right, I want to go through just some bullet point takeaways, but first let's talk about Hugh Freeze and some of the comments that he made. And you've got a few about the quarterbacks. But before we get into that, this is one of the quotes that he said in postgame. I thought Holden Geriner threw some good balls. He missed a couple of reads on some RPOs, I think. TJ did too. But it's kind of been that way all spring. Some really positives one day and some inconsistencies the next day. We've got time to help them improve, hopefully.
They're not RPO quarterback. I mean, I would expect them to miss reads on the RPOs because that's not a system I think either one of them are comfortable playing. When TJ Finley came from LSU, he played in a pro style. When Holden Geriner played high school, he played in a pro style. So I don't know what Robby did at Hoover. I don't know what Robby did at Oregon. I think Oregon's more RPO than Auburn is, but he just looks more comfortable. So I expected that. I kind of felt like there was going to be some misreads.
But the decision making should certainly be a part of it. Like,
well,
I don't
TJ
think
he threw into triple coverage at one point. That was a poor decision.
Yeah, got bailed out by a DPI that was not pass interference.
Right. Now, Geriner didn't look like he may have misread some open receivers, and he did throw one behind Martin. He made the right read. He just threw it 3 yards behind Nick Martiner across the middle. But I couldn't tell. It's hard with the naked eye to tell what he misread, like what receiver or maybe route option he was supposed to go to that he missed. It's hard to figure that out. I will say this, is that Sean Jackson was mostly Geriner's tailback.
Mm-hmm.
And if he was misreading the RPO handoff, he misread it 12 times for 77 yards because Sean Jackson, led the team in rushing. And again, when you talked about putting his shoulder down, he gets those extra yards.
He falls like forward every time.
Falls forward, yeah.
That's right. Another thing that Hugh said when I was watching the SEC Network Plus crew talking to Hugh before the game, he was asked about execution today going into the game. Coach, what do you think about it? And he said, hopefully it won't be terrible.
I don't know. I can't remember, or I would have nothing to draw from about some of his early comments when he first came to Ole Miss or first came to Liberty. I don't know if this is a calculated, thought out process to kind of underplay what he's got, or to just kind of play that game a little bit of downplaying stuff. I don't know.
I think the expectations are higher here than at Ole Miss or Liberty.
I asked him about I asked him about the offensive line play, because from the naked eye and from just somebody that's not a football coach, I watched it and was very impressed with it. And his comment in the press conference to me was, "Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic." So it's
about the offensive line.
About the offensive line, he's not going to go hyperbole on anything or go over the top. There were a few people we'll talk about in a minute that he specifically mentioned by name that his freaking eyes lit up when he talked about. And it was very obvious that he could not hide his excitement. But, he just was not – he didn't down the offensive line. He just said he was cautiously optimistic. And word in the press box yesterday was this offensive line looks different and looks better. So he was trying to kind of keep that. Yeah, he was trying to keep that under wraps. So I don't know with his execution comment – if he's just trying to play it close to the vest and or wait for something else that may be coming down the pike.
Yeah, right. Do you have any comments that Hugh made that you want to touch on before we kind of go through some of the
I do. The first one was he was very honest when talking about the running game and how he felt like the running game was very, very good, but that the defensive line and stopping the running game was not. He was very concerned about that. Yeah. Optimistic about the running game, but concerned about the defensive line not being able to stop the run. He mentioned Damari Alston by name, and this was so interesting to me and telling. He said, I got it wrong because I may have done him a disservice and undersold him somewhat before I got here, not knowing what kind of running back he is. And he has had one of the best springs so far. He mentioned him by name and made a point to single out that he undersold the kid before he came on campus.
You know why I think he said that? You know why I think he said that?
Why?
Because I think Cobb's coming in and he doesn't want Damari to transfer.
That's a good point. I don't know.
Now, what he said could be true. I'm not saying that he doesn't think Damari's good. I just think he's also saying, like, hey, like, you have a role on this team.
The running back room,
stats.
Again, Sean Jackson is one of those guys may just be a situational back, but we talked about how Cobb's going to have to fight for. He's special.
I don't know how he plays right now,
but with those three looking the way they looked
on offense,
and even Jackson as well. I said three; those four. It's going to be interesting to see how he gets on the field.
I don't think Jackson has a relevant role in the offense.
I think he should.
That's fine. I'm with you.
I think you should have
short down too.
Just short down. I'm not talking about like everyday carries, but I think inside the 5, when Auburn struggled to score or get push, he's a good back on 3rd and 1. Or inside the goal
I'm with
line.
you. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well,
I think getting other guys on the field is more important.
Could be, and it makes sense, especially a Cobb who's coming there The other comment that he made that I found very interesting was he singled out Lou, Faulk, and Lee and said these are 3 dynamic freshmen that have contributed right out of the gate. They're great human beings, and we're lucky to have 3 guys like that. They're going to make an impact as freshmen.
3 freshmen, 3 guys that will quasi start. I don't know if any of them are actually in line to start day one.
I think Lou started with next to Avery Jones.
He did start. He started at guard. Yeah, started at guard. So, which I guess Tate Johnson didn't play, did he? If he did, I didn't notice him.
Yeah, I couldn't tell again. I was trying to figure out, and it's hard when you're talking about linemen that don't get announced and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But the offensive starters were interesting because there was Connor Lew was at guard, and your receivers were Coy Moore, Rivaldo Fairweather, Javarius Johnson, and Nick Mardner.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay. Camden Brown's not playing.
Yeah.
And then Camden Brown came out with the 2s.
Yeah, that surprised me. Well, he's been limited with that ankle injury all spring, so I think that he didn't get the amount of reps maybe to get out there with the 1s.
I don't know. I thought that was telling. I thought it was very interesting. Defensive starters, the only one that really stood out to me was Rogers and Jones at the same time. And I think just whatever set they choose to do, like, I don't know, there's going to be like 6 defensive linemen that are like kind of starters. So, but they opened the game with Rogers and Jones both in at the same time. So that's pretty fun. The linebackers that they started with were Austin Keys and Wesley Steiner. Take that for what it's worth. And Keys made the first 2 tackles of the game, which is pretty fun. And then Caleb Wooden being the starting star / nickel. I thought that was interesting.
Made a play where he knocked a ball down on a route from Geriner. Marquise Gilbert at safety made a real nice play where he blew up, I believe, Battie in the backfield. He looked very aggressive. It was just hard to get a read on any kind of, I don't know, defensive standouts. It really was. And I get it. Again, it's because when you're running the ball like that, it's just in shuffling bodies in. It's pretty different.
Yep. And then your starting safeties were Jalen Simpson and Zion Puckett. No Donovan Kaufman. Take that for
that was telling. That was surprising to me as well.
We haven't heard a lot about him this spring, so we'll see what happens there. All right, I'm just going to go through some of my bullet points, and then you can just.
Okay. Yeah, because I want to go back to one Freeze comment that I left out that I think.
Go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do that.
This was the most eye-opening of all. Reporter asked Hugh Freeze yesterday about the quarterback play, and then he followed it up and said, "Okay, in this era of transfer portal, I have to ask the question: is it possible that Auburn's starting quarterback is not on campus?" And Hugh Freeze did not shy away from the question. Said, "We like the guys we have. We feel like we can win with them. But if we find somebody that gives us a better chance to win and is a dynamic, experienced starter that has played the position before, we will get him and we will use him. And if he helps us win, he will start. And if guys get upset about that, then you don't want them. They're not winners anyway," is how he said it.
I love that answer. I love that attitude.
He's like, then that's not the kind of attitude you want if people get upset about it and want to transfer. I mean, he made it very clear that they will be looking for a quarterback to add to the room if it's somebody that he mentioned a couple of adjectives that were telling. Dynamic guy that started already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there may be a few of those out there. We'll see.
Yeah.
Messiah Nasili Kite, the defensive lineman, played a bunch of different spots. Him wearing number 33 is really trippy for me. It's just not 33 should not be on the defensive line. That's going to take some getting used to.
Exactly.
I made a note, is Damari ahead of Battie? ? And he might be.
They look very similar as far as production. Battie ran the ball early so much better, picking his holes, bouncing outside. But then Alston made 2 runs late in the first half that really were the reason why Auburn went in and scored. I mean,
which back, Darrell, do you think is more similar to Hunter? Austin? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering if Damari is Jarquez's backup And then Battie just does stuff that he's asked to do. That's kind of what I'm feeling right now, but I don't know if that fully makes sense, if I'm being honest with you.
No, I see what you're saying. I wonder, and it would be nice. He seems like a perfect back to catch the ball out of the backfield on screen passes and that kind of thing. He's so shifty and quick and jitterbug type back and finds the holes that you're like, oh, that ain't opening it up, and then boom, it does. So he's got a role. I liked him a lot. I was very impressed with the way he ran the football today.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's see. I've got a note about Kayin Lee having a great play on Mardner. I think I was on a third down play on an out-breaking route. He jumped it. He almost picked it. And then he also got in Landon King's face, which we kind of asked, like, okay, his size is kind of his weakness. Yeah. And then Landon King's like a foot taller than him, and he didn't care. So that was great. Really, the only negative I saw from Kayin was on probably the best offensive play of the game when Robby threw it to Tavares Dawson on a beautiful seam, and it was placed right in between. And I don't know enough about the defensive playbook to know whose fault this is, but it was placed right in between Kayin Lee's zone and safety Craig McDonald's zone. And McDonald ended up making the tackle, but I'd like to know whose assignment that was. But Kayin Lee was kind of trailing him at the end of that, and it was a great throw by Robby.
It was a little out and up seam route, and Robby threw it and released it exactly when he had to, right Beautiful. When Dawson was coming out of his break. I saw Dawson get some separation. I saw the ball in the air, and it couldn't be placed any better than it was. It was a great throw. It really was.
Mm-hmm. I got a note about Wilkie Denard. Looked solid to me as a true freshman.
It surprised me. I mean, that did. That's just not a name. I thought it was a name that was going to fall down the depth chart. Again, to me, and maybe watching it on TV was a little, but I didn't see Imba do anything. He seemed a little bit, I don't.
Towards the end of the broadcast, they zoomed in on Imba and talked about how he's like the former #1 JUCO player and all that. But I didn't see a whole lot of him either. I didn't really notice him either. If they didn't do that special on him. Did you notice who crashed in really hard on Robby's big, I don't think it's the one he scored on, but his big run where it was a read?
Did not.
It was Cam Riley. Just totally ate that. Just totally ate that give. So that was a bummer. Do you get the vibe there's 4 people in front of Cam Riley now? Do you get that vibe, or is that
I do. And I mean, you kind of been saying that coming out of spring practice with your little windows, and I was shocked and disappointed. I literally thought you would pencil him in as a starter, and he was absolutely slam dunk, and it's not. I mean, there's guys ahead of him in the rotation. It looked like Levant played more snaps than him, to be honest with you.
I think Levant gets more rotation snaps at the 1 than Cam Riley does. Does he transfer?
If he comes out of now that spring's over as the 4th option a linebacker, he should. Yeah.
We talked about this briefly, but there was a pass interference on Jalen Simpson that TJ Finley threw it into triple coverage, and he was targeting Jay Fair, and he got bailed out by a DPI. That would not be called in a normal game.
Would not. And there was another situation where Auburn had an opportunity to extend a drive, and it was the weirdest thing. They could have had a first down, and they declined the penalty. And I think that was just because of time constraints early on and to get the other offensive grouping on the field. Yeah, for the very first drive, there was or maybe it was TJ's drive. I can't remember, but there was a first down, a penalty that would have given Auburn a first down, and they declined it. So I know it was just kind of strange.
Then my last thing is great play by Landon King, little catch and run from Holden Geriner kind of late in the game. So those were kind of my bullet point takeaways.
Very small sample size to see, spring games are just a little bit of an appetizer to whet your appetite anyway. This was even, pared down more because of weather and because of availability and that kind of thing. So I think that the framework and some of what I saw as far as offensive philosophy, I'm very excited about. I mean, I just am. I think I saw receivers getting open. I like the RPO. Now, when you get bodies to plug in to play that to the system, I fully trust this staff. that they're going to run out the best 22. Feelings aren't going to matter. And I'm excited about structure. I'm excited about what I saw was a blueprint, although we just saw a little taste. I saw some things early on that I didn't see in spring games in a while from an offensive standpoint.
Is there a glaring concern from what you saw on Saturday?
I want to not overreact on the defensive line giving up so many chunks of yardage from the run game. So I'll wait to hold judgment on that. That could be a concern. But go ahead.
Well, I'm not super concerned about that because I think a lot of like what Ron Roberts does defensively, like he didn't do any of it. Like he didn't do any kind of that like stuff yesterday. Like we saw guys play different positions, but like it really wasn't that creative. And I think a big part of what he does defensively is he makes the opposing offensive linemen like think and make decisions. And like I don't think there was a whole lot of threat of like, is there going to be an extra guy coming through a gap yesterday? And so I just think over the course of that, you'd force more negative plays.
And that's where I got to change my mindset because I think of an extra guy coming in a gap or making offensive linemen think in the passing game. But you can still utilize that in the run game too because a guy goes through a gap that's unblocked and he blows up a play in the backfield like Gilbert did or something like that. So, I always equate, blitzing and all these different packages and making offensive linemen think in different looks with a quarterback dropping back to pass, but you could utilize that in the run game too. Yeah. And the only other thing I would say, I kind of knocked Heather Dinich a little bit on a previous podcast we did for her comments about the receivers. And there's been a recurring theme about the receivers having to catch up. Again, it's a small sample size because they threw it 6 times, but I don't know.
They look lost. They looked really lost out there. Heather Dinich was all over it.
Yeah, I saw a couple of balls go through people's hands and all. So I don't know. I want to see that before fall get cleaned up as well.
But even like watching Camden run routes, and I mean, I just didn't really ever seem like anybody ever expected the ball. Like I don't know, it just didn't look right. It just didn't look right, Darrell.
They may have known though. Who knows? I mean, they may have known that the ball was not going to be thrown, but 7 times, so they kind of went through the motions. But they need to get that cleaned up.
And that's not good.
It's
you don't need to be playing for Auburn.
And guess what? They'll find somebody that doesn't go through the motions and put them on the field. That's what I like about this coaching staff.
You're right. Darrell, any final thoughts?
Well, I will just say the way Hugh Freeze handled everything in the post-game press conference was really refreshing. He was very, very open and honest, good and bad, and it led an immediate reaction from TJ Finley to comment and say he doesn't know whether or not if he brings another quarterback in through the portal if he'll be at Auburn. He doesn't know. He's going to have to talk it over with his family. He doesn't know if he'll be here because of comments that, as he said, Hugh Freeze has made more than once about going to find a quarterback. I thought that was very telling. And I think if you're willing to do that and you're willing to put it out there and not worry about hurting feelings, I have to go back to what we've said for a long time is that the starting quarterback, I'd be totally satisfied right now from what I saw in the RPO. And if Robby's growth and maturation level can improve over the summer, I would be happy and fine with Robby running this team. I just have a feeling this coaching staff feels like they want more.
I certainly get that feeling too. We'll see. Darrell, thank you so much for hopping on and doing
this. It's fun
to
do it again. It's been a while since we've done it. The Iron Bowl was the last time we did a little reaction show for football. So this was great to be back in the saddle again, per se.
Absolutely. Be sure to give Darrell some love. That's his Twitter handle down there, Dap6410. You can find me on socials at @Blackerby and all of my written work at auburndaily.com. We will see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.